Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session at the Digital Council Africa annual Fibre Connects conference. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly created a lot of havoc over the past year, and I think we've extensively discussed it by now, just the impact and the devastation that it's left in its wake. However, it's also had some positive spins on a couple of sectors that have actually benefited from the pandemic. One of those sectors obviously being the digital sector, as more and more people have adopted digital services. Today, it's a real privilege for me to welcome Mr. Andre Wills from Africa Analysis to share with us a little bit of information around the impact of the pandemic on the digital sector, what they've seen to date, and a little bit more about what they expect to see going forward. Just by way of introduction, Andre Wills is the Managing Director of Africa Analysis. It's a research and consulting house, and we're proud to say it's a long-standing partner of the Digital Council Africa. The company was founded in 2002, and they've consulted extensively on numerous projects across the African markets in the XTech sector. Andre himself has more than 24 years experience in the ICT sector in various analyst and consulting roles. And over this time span, he's traveled extensively across Africa and the Middle East, in fact, to more than 22 countries, consulting on projects within the space. So very welcome, Andre. It's a great privilege for us to have you, and we're really excited to listen to you this morning.
Good morning, everybody. It's certainly great to share virtual time with you, and thank you, Juanita, for arranging the opportunity to share our findings on the impact of COVID-19 on the fibre to the home and fibre to the business market. We track the market quite closely, and every quarter we meet with various fibre network operators and retail service providers to understand how the market has developed. And this has given us a good, solid base in order to assess what COVID-19 has done to the fibre to the home and fibre to the business market. And we'd like to share with you the findings over the next 30 minutes. So what will we be speaking about? I'm briefly going to touch on our research program. It's the core program that we run to track developments across the fibre market. Then I'd like to touch on the South African broadband market, just to show you what is happening in the market, where we are and where fibre is positioned. Most importantly, where fibre is positioned in that market. Then I'd like to look at the impact of COVID-19. And just to give you a bit of a heads up, it's interesting that the impact in the fibre to the home and fibre to the business market, as you'd expect, is radically different. Based on that, we want to have a look at what we expect the markets will do over the coming 3 years, and then I'll wrap up and give a summary of what we found through this presentation. So let's kick off with what is the program that I'm speaking about, from which we draw our information. Well, the research program has been running for quite a few years, and every quarter we meet with various fibre network operators and retail service providers, and we go through discussion, typically an hour discussion, on what their views are, what their experiences are, and importantly, they then share their numbers with us regarding the market. We then package that up and issue a high-level report saying what has transpired in the market. And this gives us the capability on a quarter-by-quarter basis to, for example, see how many homes have been passed, how many homes have been connected. And in the last quarter, we issued our first fibre to the business report as well, that covered the COVID-19 quarter. When I refer to the COVID-19 quarter, I'm referring to the quarter ending June 2020. So we undertake extensive supply side. We probably run through, in a year, we run through about 20 plus interviews across the industry. And we then populate our fibre to the business database. Important when we speak about fibre access in the access market, what are we talking about? I first want to make sure we're all on the same page. So let's look at that. When we look at fiber access market, we can break the market down into 5 categories, of which we track 4. So we have fiber to the curve that feeds DSL. We have fiber to the home as a distinct market. We have fiber to the business, best efforts, BE, as part of the broadband market. We then have fiber to the business on a quality of service-based basis, a dedicated link. And then we have fiber to the site, fiber to towers or fiber to data centers. When we track the broadband market, we look at fiber across the 3 categories in terms of feeding DSL, feeding the home, and feeding the business best efforts market. Our presentation focus today is on the center 3 categories, namely fiber to the home, fiber to the business best efforts, and the fiber to the business quality of service. So that gives you a good feel for where we're focusing our presentation today. So how big is the broadband market, and what is the broadband market, and what does the market look like? Let's have a look at first, what are we going to be looking at? The broadband market is comprised, based on access technologies, of 5 segments: the traditional copper-based technology, DSL, optical access technology, the fiber-based. We look at fixed wireless, and it's important to understand when we look at fixed wireless, we count fixed LTE as part of the fixed wireless category. We have other, typically satellite, but satellite's very small. And then we have GSM broadband, and that market is the 3G, 4G, 5G. How big is the South African market? So let me give you an indication of how big this market is. As of March 2020, we had an estimated 65 million connections across the market. This is only broadband, excludes any dedicated links, so it excludes Diginet, excludes fiber to the business quality of service. We had 65 million broadband links, and that is an astounding number. However, one must remember that the bulk of that, over 95% consists of the mobile broadband market. The mobile broadband, which is made up of smartphones, the bulk of that is smartphones. The dongles, those are the modems and USBs we plug into our devices, or onboard SIMs inside notebooks and tablets. The fixed broadband market is quite small. It's about 2.8 million in total. That in itself is quite significant in terms of a fixed broadband number, and I'll share why later. And then contrasted against the size of the market is the fiber to the home and fiber to the business market of just under 1 million connections. It's 700. About 700, just over 800 connections, 800,000 connections. As I mentioned, the skewness of this market, when we throw out a number like 65 million, is that we're counting smartphones as well. And smartphones contribute 85% of the broadband connections in this country. And this is typical of any developing market where the mobile industry has become the de facto broadband provider across for access to the internet. It also explains why when you look at the broadband market and you look at the smartphone market, it is so important that if you are looking to develop scale and you're looking to develop applications, then you need to make sure you target the broadband market, namely the smartphone market, as part of that. When we break down this market, you can see that the fixed component is quite small. The smallest segment is the traditional fixed wireless. Fixed wireless is mostly found in the urban to rural areas, and these are the wireless fixed wireless networks in the smaller towns and cities. Interesting enough, when we look at access technology, the question that comes to mind is, what is happening in terms of adoption of technology? And let's put fiber in perspective to that. We often like to look at the maturity curve, and what I'm showing you in terms of the curve to the right is the status as of 2015, and then the status as of 2020. No surprises, DSL is in decline. Yes, Telkom, or OpenServe, I should say, did launch their naked ADSL inverted commas. Based on feedback from the market, it hasn't significantly altered the downward trajectory of DSL. It has slowed it slightly, but when you look at that market, you find that DSL continues to slide. Interestingly enough, is that 2015 was a key year for broadband in South Africa. When you look at the 2015 status of either fibre or fixed LTE, or fibre to the business or fibre to the home, you'll notice that they were in the introductory phases in 2015. The technology that is maturing is fibre, fixed wireless access, fixed wireless access, and fibre to the business quality of service. And you'll see why later I make that statement. And it's based on the numbers, and it's based on some of the interesting trajectories taking place in the market as we know today. Growth markets, these are fibre to the home, showing strong growth, fibre to the business, best efforts, and fixed LTE. And introduction phase, no surprise, fixed 5G. You would have noticed we're not looking at mobile at the moment. Mobile 5G would also be in the introduction phase. So wrapping up on the status of broadband, just how big is the fixed broadband market per se? Overall, you may recall I mentioned the market is sized at 2.8 million. Fixed LTE, by the way, has done exceptionally well since its inception, and it accounts for an estimated 1.1 million. By the way, fixed LTE does include a small contribution from fixed 5G. So read that as fixed LTE/fixed 5G. The second largest component in the broadband market, either for consumer or business, is the fibre to the home, fibre to the business, just on 800,000. DSL, as of March, just clipped just over 500,000, and fixed wireless about 430,000. In terms of market share, fixed LTE holds 38%, and that's followed by, fibre at 28%. This then gives us a good background to the state of the market, where we were at March 2020. So what happened in the COVID quarter, namely the quarter April, May, June, when we experienced the lockdown? I'll be speaking about fibre to the home first, and then fibre to the business as the second part. So what happened to fibre to the home? A number of interesting aspects arose. Firstly, we saw a rapid rise in connection orders. These were not just restricted to fibre to the home. We saw the mobile operators report significant jumps in orders for connectivity. The impact of the COVID-19 on the fibre network operators was twofold. Firstly, there was an immediate freeze on building a network, and the reasons for that is that the fibre network operators and the installation teams needed to sort out processes and procedures of how to conduct themselves while the strict level 5 lockdown was imposed on the country. In addition, the fibre network operators reported that some of the estates where build was taking place, the homeowners associations indicated that they did not want to have teams come through who potentially could expose their residents to COVID-19. Well, it is interesting when we spoke to the different fibre network operators, because they each had slightly different strategies that came to the fore later on in the COVID quarter towards May, June. Firstly, some of the fibre network operators, once they sorted out their processes, commenced rebuilding, while some of the others only finished off existing build. And you'll see later what that meant for homes passed in that quarter. Interestingly enough, when we look at some of the activities that arose in that quarter, either from a fibre network operator or retail service provider / internet service provider, is that fibre network operators held back price increases for that quarter. Interestingly, they did introduce the double line speed promotion, but that was only with participating ISPs. This is an interesting area, by the way, because when you double the line speed, there are additional costs incurred. And since the consumer or the customer did not incur that cost, the question then arises, who incurred the cost? And by and large, the internet service providers needed to carry the incremental cost introduced through doubling the line speed. Now, if you're not too familiar with the industry, you may ask the question, so where does that cost come from? Well, in some cases, if you're one of the smaller internet service providers and you are running at the upper limit of your peering, you would have to have increased peering. You would have to have increased backhaul to ensure that your customers still experienced a good service. One of the developments that took place was businesses approaching both fiber network operators and retail service providers to talk about bulk deals. For those businesses who are able to continue operating in a business environment with a workforce that is working from home, then sought out deals whereby they would package up all of the employees who needed access during the lockdown, who could work from home. They then approached various internet service providers and fiber network operators and explored a bulk deal. And this then indicated that there was a migration of spend. Well, it wasn't a migration of spend, actually, it was an additional spend to enable workforce to continue working from a home environment. There were some challenges with this approach in that the footprint of either fiber network operators or what the internet service provider could offer didn't quite match up to the location of the employees for a business. So some deals didn't go through. It's hard to say where those deals finally ended. But it was an interesting how we saw the sponsorship of home connectivity rise quickly to the fore for businesses in order to enable the workforce to continue to work from home. Now that we all moved home in the lockdown period, there was other interesting observations we made about the environment. What are these? I'll come to that. So what happened in the quarter? Let me touch on these numbers. So I'm showing you three charts. The green chart shows you the homes connected per quarter, homes passed per quarter. The center chart, the blue chart, shows the homes connected in that quarter. And the tan chart to your far right shows simple ratio of homes connected over homes passed. Firstly, homes passed. You can see that the drop off was not as significant as one would have expected for fiber to the home, homes passed. Why did this take place? Well, you will recall that I mentioned that some of the fiber network operators, once they sorted out their build process, then continued to build out and pass homes. As a result, the homes passed did drop, but not significantly. So it dropped around about 18% from quarter on quarter, from the 96,000 homes passed in the quarter ending March 2020 to just on 80,000 homes passed in the quarter ending June 2020, or the COVID quarter. Where it really gets interesting is when we look at homes connected. The center chart shows us, and you can see the significant jump in homes connected. On average, for the last 4 quarters I've shown, we were running at just over 55 to 60,000 homes connected per quarter. In the June quarter, we jumped to 100,000 homes connected. By the way, this is the single highest quarter in the history of the market. We have not seen so many homes passed, and we have never seen a triple-digit homes passed in terms of thousands of homes connected in a single quarter. Well, this brings me to the third chart, the tan chart. What we express here are homes connected over homes passed. If you're over 100%, you connected more homes. If you're under 100%, you connected less homes. From this, you can see we connected 125% of homes passed, i.e. we connected far more homes than we passed in that quarter. And this highlights the rapid rise in the fiber to the homes connected market. So when we look at what happened in the telecom space, and specifically in the space dealing with home connectivity, the COVID-19 had a positive impact on this segment of the market, and we saw the homes connected jump. By the way, it wasn't the only access technology that saw such a boost. Mobile connections jumped in terms of data connections. The fixed LTE connections jumped as well. What this has done is introduce the home environment to the digital world. And I'll touch on that. So as of June 2020, we had 1.9 million homes passed, 776,000 homes connected, and this gave us a connected ratio of 40%. And you can see from the blue chart to the right, the rise in the ratio of homes connected and the step jump in the last quarter, namely the June quarter, from 36% to 40%. And it shows you that for the fiber to the home market, there was a step change in demand. Now, the question arises, will that continue? We're currently getting the numbers back from the different fiber network operators and retail service providers to answer that question. What happened at the home? Interestingly enough, the COVID lockdown forced the home to either expand existing digital services or take on new digital services. The 6 broad categories that we saw unfold in the home environment over that quarter: firstly, work from home. We saw a large move with the people to home, introduce the work from home. And by the way, when we talk about work from home, it's one of the services where it both consumes data and produces data. What do I mean by that? Well, when I say consume data, I'm downloading data. When I produce data, I'm uploading data. And in the work from home environment, the production of data is through the collaboration tools and platforms that were used by people working from home, and still today that takes place. So we do live streaming from home. This very conference and this virtual presentation demonstrates the production of data from our side. School at home, with a huge disruption to the schooling system. Excuse me, schooling took place at home. Entertainment at home was always there. It grew much bigger. People had more time on their hands. The gaming environment, online gaming environment, went through quite a radical jump. The subscription to various OTT services, streaming services, took a significant step upwards. Then we saw other interesting developments, such as the exercise at home for those who follow a key exercise regime or wanted to do something different to break the boredom at home and to create something different to keep one's sanity during the lockdown period. The shop at home is interesting. We've always had shop at home, but it's who are the new people who shopped at home. One of the aspects about the COVID-19 was the huge fear of picking up the COVID-19. We certainly, as our own family, we had followed strict protocols in terms of lockdown, and it was important that we protected ourselves. So as a result, many people shopped online for the first time out of necessity, not out of desire. And we believe that behavior will continue through and will come entrenched in our way of shopping. So it certainly gave a huge boost for the shop at home segment or the e-commerce segment. The other interesting aspect that we saw emerge is the social at home. What we have seen emerge more strongly are people socializing, or just simply having dinner, but then sharing the dinner experience by a WhatsApp stream or one of the social media platforms, so that while we're not visiting each other, we're still sharing a meal or sharing a discussion or sharing snacks, them in their home, us in our home. And that was an interesting development. What this has done has accelerated the adoption into the digital world. What it also has highlighted, by the way, is the significant digital divide. Now, for all of the people who are able to afford broadband, the lockdown period has hampered all of us, but had slightly less impact on those who had access versus those who did not have access. And we believe that going forward, one of the areas that would need to be looked at is, what do we do to bridge the digital divide? And there are a number of issues and number of challenges in that space, but likewise, there are a number of initiatives underway. Let's turn our attention now to fiber to the business. What happened to the fiber to the business markets? Not as good as fiber to the home market, outright saying that up front. Based on the feedback of the different players in the market, there was a decline in connection orders, and I'll touch on those numbers a bit later. We saw businesses either seek to cancel their connection or downgrade their connection from either a quality of service to a best efforts or from a high speed to a low speed. Key reason is that these connections for a period sat idle at the business premises. Why? Just all the employees were working from home. So in effect, the bandwidth that was consumed at the corporate site migrated to the ISP network and was consumed at home. This resulted in the market needing to innovate on products to ensure that the fiber to the business market did not suffer a terminal failure at all. So how bad was it? Well, I'm showing you two charts on this slide. The blue chart represents fiber to the business best efforts, and the green chart represents fiber to the business quality of service. The second observation you would have noticed is I've indexed the numbers. These numbers are out of our most recent report, and we're not too willing to share those quite yet for a variety of reasons. I've indexed it to the net adds for fiber to the business best efforts for June 2019. You can see immediately the impact upon the fiber to the business market. On the best effort side, the market shrank by 68% in net adds from the March 2020 period to the June 2020 period. The fiber to the business quality of service suffered an even bigger decline of 74%. Hence, I'm saying up front that the feedback from the market is that while the fiber to the home market saw a boom, fiber to the business market saw a radical decline in demand. What does this mean for the future of the two markets? Well, based on feedback on our analysis, we see interesting trends emerge in the market. Firstly, fiber to the home, and I'm only looking ahead 3 years here. We've seen continued uptake in the core market. What's important is the growth in the lower income markets, commonly known today as the Vuma Reach product. This is an important part of the fiber market going forward. And over the next 3 years, we're going to be seeing increased retail competition as retail service providers strive to differentiate themselves from their competitors. By March 2023, we expect to have 2.7 million homes passed. Excuse me. We expect to have 1.4 million homes connected. This gives an overall connection of 52%. So we're still quite positive that the market's going to grow over the coming 3 years and do very well for itself. So what about the fiber to the business market? Different trajectories in this market. We think at the moment, the fiber to the business quality of service market will show a slow recovery. And in fact, over the next 3 odd years, its compound annual growth rate year on year is going to be single digit, about 5.5%. We expect to see a good recovery and growth in fiber to the business market, best efforts, and its 3-year compound annual growth rate is, we're looking at triple that of the fiber to the business quality of service, namely 14.9%. We do think we'll see a lot more downward pricing pressure being exerted in the market. And interestingly enough, this year and the impact of COVID-19 we believe will create a watershed year for the fiber network operators deploying fiber to the business. And we will be seeing divergent strategies emerging in the market. We think that fiber to the business will follow the fiber to the home strategy in terms of rollout, and we'll be seeing the driving of connections in that space. So let's wrap up and bring this to a conclusion. What have we seen? Firstly, what did the COVID-19 mean for the market? Simply put, bandwidth moved from the corporate network to the ISP network. We saw the acceleration of the digital world adoption through necessity, as we described. The fiber to the home market saw a significant jump in the June quarter, while the fiber to the business market saw a significant decline in the June quarter. Whereas our outlook, we expect fiber to show good growth, we expect quality of service to show slow growth, and we expect fiber to the business best efforts to show good recovery. And that's our view of what took place and the impact on the outlook of the markets. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Unita and the team for this opportunity to present our findings on the COVID impact on the fiber market in 2020. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Sure, thank you, Andre. That was really insightful and leaves one much to think about. I think we keep focusing on it, but I think our sector is not one that can separate itself, from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think your presentation has certainly helped us put a lot of this into context and clarified a lot of what the guesswork that's been done to date. So yeah, the only thing that we know for certain is that things will never be the same again, and hopefully it will change for the better. Thank you, Andre. Certainly interesting times we're living in, and thank you very much for giving us some of your time to help us navigate these uncharted waters.